What's up, guys? Welcome to my office. If you've been paying attention to the news over the last couple of weeks, you know that there was a catastrophic explosion in Beirut, Lebanon at the start of this month. When it happened, I didn't really want to say anything about it, but it's gotten to be a bit of a more complex situation since it happened, and I'm starting to have some thoughts. I used to live in Beirut, Lebanon, and I kind of know that neighborhood, so I'm going to do three things today. I'm going to show you the clip of what happened, in case you haven't already seen it. I'm going to show you where I lived and where it happened so that you can understand the geography in that location. And then I'm going to say a couple of things that this is making me think about the situation and why it's not likely to get better anytime soon. The first thing I'll do is I'll pop over here to this video from The Guardian and we get to watch this together. Here it goes. Pay attention to this image because we're going to come back to it in a second. So that was clearly extraordinary, and unfortunately, it couldn't have happened in a worse place. So one of the main things that we want to point out about where this happened in the port of Beirut, which is where most of Lebanon's imports actually come into the country. About 60% of the imports into Lebanon come in through the port of Beirut. So there's a warehouse here, and there are buildings. Well, there are warehouses all around, and there's this particular building that looks like a grain elevator because it is. And something like 80% of the country's grain reserves were stored in this elevator, which is also disturbing because, as you just saw, it was basically vaporized in the blast. I'm going to pop over to the satellite imagery from Zoom Earth. Okay? And here's where we are. We're in the Eastern Mediterranean. You've got Egypt and Israel, and Lebanon is here. I'm going to zoom in so you can see. Here's the peninsula where Beirut is. When I zoom into Beirut, right, here is exactly what we were just looking at. This is the warehouse where a few thousand tons of ammonium nitrate were being stored in very, very unsafe conditions. This is the grain elevator, and as you see, it's the only one of its kind anywhere near this vicinity. So that's where 80% of the country's grain reserves are being stored. Here's a very, very major highway. This is called Charles Hello. It's also called Highway 51, which is why I know this neighborhood. I've driven through here on this highway. I recognized that building when I saw the videos the first time because when I rolled through here, that grain elevator was so unbelievably obvious to me. I'm from the Midwest, so I'm used to grain elevators being everywhere, and I was not expecting to see a grain elevator in Beirut, Lebanon, where it doesn't look anything like Illinois or Iowa, and it's a huge metropolis. But there it is, the grain elevator and the port of Beirut. As we're going to see in a minute, this area of town was absolutely devastated. Now, I was not, when I was there, even though I've been through this neighborhood, I did not live anywhere near that. I actually was all the way over here in Hamra. So it's pretty easy to see where I lived because it was exactly this building. In fact, on Zoom Earth, we've got June of 2017. So in June of 2017, I was living in this building, in the top floor apartment, specifically this one. So the elevators are here, and then you go into the kitchen, and here is what would have been my patio. You can see it very clearly, and I'm probably in this building right now in this picture. It's about 2 miles. In fact, it's almost exactly 2 miles if I went and measured it from the point of the blast. So this building is most likely not that damaged, but the air blast, according to the New York Times, the air blast from this explosion broke windows as far away as 2 miles. And I'll zoom out again so you see just how much of the city that would be. here's the explosion, here's where I lived, and a radius of 2 miles is very, very large. So there could be damage to a huge proportion of the city. And when you talk about windows being destroyed, even if the buildings are still standing, these homes are not necessarily habitable without windows, especially in a lot of these newer buildings that use a lot of glass, right? Glass facades on skyscrapers and such. You can see many, many pictures if you go to a Google image search, or if you go read the other news about what's going on. You see many, many pictures of buildings that used to have glass facades that have been stripped, that are utterly uninhabitable at this point. But that's where I was. I lived in this building. So we've got the Central Bank of Lebanon is over here, and we've got American University of Beirut is over here. So it's a nice neighborhood for an economist to live in. The explosion 2 miles away in the port of Beirut. Here is some evidence from NASA, okay? And according to some synthetic aperture radar, this is the area where you can actually see from space with radar changes in the topography. So changes in the shape of the surface down here. And as you see, dark red tells you that some sort of buildings are probably missing because the shape of the area, the landscape, has changed so much, and that tends to spread out throughout the entire port. So why is this not likely to get better anytime soon? Lebanon's a reasonably small country, okay? Beirut has about 2 million people in it. Lebanon, as a whole, has about 4 million people in it. It also is home to more refugees per capita than any other country on earth. Right? Lebanon is very, very full of Syrian refugees. So there's already sort of a housing shortage in Lebanon because of the influx of Syrian refugees over the last 10 years. It's been going on for a while. The statistics based on this explosion are very disturbing. So it killed something like 180 people. It wounded something like 6,000 people, and 300,000 people are homeless. 300,000 people being homeless in a city of 2 million people, in a nation of 4 million people. Just think about the amount of housing that was destroyed relative to the size of the population, and these people really don't have anywhere else to go, right? So everybody is crammed into fewer quarters now, and we're seeing shocking inflation, if we want to talk about inflation, or if we want to talk about pricing. We're seeing shocking increases in pricing, price gouging, if you want to call it that. I'm an economist, so I wouldn't like to use that term, but the supply of housing has been severely decreased due to the destruction of the capital stock that occurred with this explosion. But it's not just housing, right? The port of Beirut, like I said, 60% of all of the imports into Lebanon come in through the port of Beirut. 80% of the grain reserves of the entire country were in those silos. So everything there is destroyed. This capital stock has been damaged to a severe extent, and they're not able to bring goods in through the port of Beirut. And when you think about the kinds of goods that they need to bring in right now to repair the damage, it's absolutely staggering how much stuff they need to bring in to repair the damage, assuming that they have money to do that. Of course, prices are going to go through the roof because of the scarcity. You can't bring in products fast enough to rebuild. You can't hire people fast enough to rebuild on the kind of timeline that you want to rebuild. Things that used to come in through the port of Beirut are now coming in through the port of Tripoli, which is many miles to the north. Yes, there's another port up there, but it's not nearly as large. Those things have to get trucked in from there. So it's really disturbing to think of how difficult it's going to be to rebuild. They have to rebuild the port. They have to be able to bring in supply to rebuild something like 1/6 of the housing in Beirut, which is basically unprecedented. All right, so it could not have happened in a worse place. The explosion was absolutely massive, and it could not have happened in a worse place than right in the middle of a huge city in a small country. So this is going to be very, very, very difficult to bounce back from. Now, what we're seeing over there is basically because of the scarcity of all the things that you might want to buy that used to come in through the port. we're seeing hyperinflation. I saw somebody use the number 50% monthly inflation. It's not a currency crisis, okay? This is inflation that is driven entirely by the scarcity of resources. So it's not that the Lebanese pound, I've got 1,000 Lebanese pounds here, so this is about 66 cents. It's pegged to the US dollar. And it's not that the Lebanese pound is losing value relative to the US dollar. They're pegged. In fact, the Central Bank of Lebanon has taken steps to move closer to using American currency. It used to be that you were allowed to pay for goods in Lebanon with American money, and you would get your change in Lebanese money. Now you are allowed to pay and get your change both in American money. The dollar isn't depreciating because of this, but prices are still going up even if you're using American money. It's because the goods that you're trying to buy are in very, very short supply because you can't bring stuff in, because a lot of the stuff that was already there was destroyed or ruined in some other way. So it's becoming a serious crisis in a country that already had multiple ongoing serious crises. So we're going to have to keep an eye on what's happening over there. I'll put some links in the description below if you want to try to donate to help improve the situation over there. You're welcome to do that. I think it's certainly a good idea. And then we'll just have to follow the situation on the ground. So there's that. Thanks for watching.